אני אעבור לאנגלית. I'm very pleased to call Professor Lynn Dodd from the University of Southern California. I received today a very long, short bio, so I will not read all of it, but I just will tell that although you are coming from the University of Southern California, you are very active in things in and about the archaeology of Jerusalem. So, please.
So good afternoon, and first of all, I'd like to say that for those of you who do not have the translation headphones and prefer to hear my comments in Hebrew, they do have those available for you. And I would like to thank the organizers for making that available to me, because I'm one of those poor, pathetic Americans who does not speak Hebrew well. And so I've had a much better experience of our speakers by virtue of having that service available, so I thank them. To start, I really would like to start and say that I compliment the colleagues who participated in this steering committee and who met over and over again. Can I use this instead or no? No. Use this one? Yeah. Okay. Who met over the past 6 months, and I'd particularly like to single out Yoni Mizrahi for his organization of this effort and for the vision that is expressed in pulling these people together and the commitment that they evinced. I think that this document achieves an important goal by, and here I'm quoting from the English language version of the plan, and the goal is by shedding light on ethical and civil issues and by formulating professional standards for the management of the treasured heritage sites of the historic basin, including the archaeological development, conservation, planning, and building. Now, my comments today are intended to give my perspective on how this plan relates to existing and needed planning efforts in Jerusalem. I recognize that I'm standing in front of a group of people who are deeply immersed in these efforts, some of you, and who are impacted in your professional life on a daily basis. But perhaps reflection by an outsider will serve some purpose. I think that to start, I wanted to point to a comment that was made by Eitan Meir in report number 4 for the local outline plan of Jerusalem 2000, who wrote that his team needed to answer the question, what kind of Jerusalem do we want for the 21st century? And the last plan officially adopted for Jerusalem, first we have Plan 62 of 1959, and then the General Outline Plan of 1974, the so-called Ein Mem plan, Ein Mem 9 plan, the more recent articulation. I'm going to be taking my comments toward policy, toward the planning framework in which something that the paper that we have been presented with, the plan that we've been presented with here, will articulate. The master plan for Jerusalem 2000, as you know, undoubtedly, was created by a team led by Moshe Cohen and ratified in 2007 by the Planning and Construction Committee of the Jerusalem Municipality and deposited with the District Commission in 2009, with changes requested by the newly elected mayor of Jerusalem, Nir Barkat. For those of you who lived through this, this is restating something already that you know, but for those who may not have been paying attention in those few years ago, or who may be coming to and listening to these comments, I just want to say that the concerns raised about the plan, as I understand it, included the fact that it prohibited buildings higher than the wall, that there was a requirement for a setback for buildings from the wall, and also the possibility of an eased permit process for Old City residents who have received few permits in decades. So I'm focusing here on the Old City. Now, that plan was challenged, and as I understand it, never deposited for public review and is not official policy at this point. So we have a vision, and we have possibility in plan, and to move into the space of action, there really will have to be meaningful shifts in planning processes and public discourse, along with a major commitment by parties to develop a planning infrastructure of a fully realized zoning plan in the Old City and its walls, and, as you all know, undoubtedly, to address the issue of unregistered properties in the Old City in particular, since we're talking about that today. I say this because we're speaking about concerns raised about zoning plans that really do resonate very well with conversations that have been put forward earlier this evening by the other speakers, and that is where there is a focus on beyond the antiquities, beyond the heritage structures that are irreplaceable, certainly, and that are of value and that are the central attraction to the core. To include people, to include the infrastructure, to include benefits beyond those experienced by tourists. Now, a central problem in creating the full planning and policy context for this plan, this one we hear about tonight, was summarized by Mick Dumper, who's long been interested in cities in conflict, when he writes that the Israeli state's de facto authority over East Jerusalem has been a much more nuanced, scattered, and diluted authority than most policymakers and the public are aware of. Also, I want to point to a comment made by Moshe Amirav of Hebrew University, who said that in the last 40 years, planning has been dictated by political criteria. I put that out there for you to consider as a possibility. Certainly, one doesn't see anything in archaeology that is not political. But if we have political criteria dictating the actions on all levels, that is, of respondents and of, obviously, politicians, perhaps we need to think beyond the immediate moment into the vision again. Go back to what was raised, and that is, what is the vision we have for Jerusalem in the 21st century? And I want to put forward a concept that you all are very familiar with, and that is simply that we have a plan which has strength in the fact that it is interest-based plan, which we have heard mentioned already. All parties' interests are served if these principles that we heard summarized tonight are supported and if they abide, even if the interim result does not deliver the political self-determination or improved quality of life that people who live in the Old City would like to enjoy, and many would say that they deserve. And even if it does not deliver on what some other members of our community might like, which is the removal of a population from the Old City, and even if it does not deliver unilateral control of the Old City, so this is one set of positions, if a plan, as it's shown here, provides a path for growth, for development, for documentation, and for discovery that is intelligently and collaboratively implemented, that is going to serve the interests of people who might have those perspectives that I just outlined, as well as the residents of all parties in Jerusalem and beyond, including those who come to Jerusalem for these sort of short episodes of consumption and spending and experience and then support and meaning. This plan that we have heard tonight, I think actually will generate real value on a range of scales that will derive benefits for Jerusalem, its residents, businesses, institutions, and global communities of faith and interest. I think we only have to look to the fact that when a population that lives in a city like this is given the planning tools, that is the detailed zoning plan that is required in order to facilitate a regular process of submitting permit applications and making renovations to their own properties, as has happened, for example, in Akko, that this really does serve the interest of all parties by giving the possibility of investment in and renewal of their historic properties in that city. And that, I think, is a vision that could be applied here in Jerusalem as well. I wanted to speak for a second about the context of this plan. So first of all, we have a plan that I believe is interest-based, which is a productive plan. Secondly, I think it has the possibility of being implemented regardless of the place that you might take on the spectrum of possibilities. That is, I have heard articulated by my colleagues here in Israel, people who believe that the old city should be an empty city, a kind of museum, and those which believe, who believe that it should be one in which the people are able to live and thrive and develop their own properties with the support of international and national institutions. Another strength of this plan, I believe, is that it is in sync with the framework of historic urban planning, which it can be considered an international best practice that values both tangible and intangible assets, that is, both the place and the people, the lifeways and the places where that is lived. Also, this historic urban landscape framework addresses the needs of infrastructure in the core and outward in the zones that support and access that core area. For those of you who are already urban planners, you know that this concept has emerged and has transformed over time from 1976, when it was a concept of an historic area, with a second component as well, which is the contemporary role in the city that is intersecting in lives of the people. Onward 20, multiple decades forward to 2005, when historic urban landscape is used in the Vienna Memorandum and then is given full expression and an operational life in 2008. This framework aims to integrate the historic fabric in urban areas undergoing modern development and to reconcile the life of the city with its historic past and to create a concentric set of supports for that. So that, and I think this is really important, the benefits and burdens are shared and not concentrated unduly. All parties remain committed to progress. I think that also this plan puts forward a new focus on doing business in an aggressively open and collaborative manner with consultation at the forefront. I think it is unfortunate, as others have said, that the IAA is not engaging this plan tonight, at least to state that it contains a formulation of principles that they would conceptually embrace. And even if they are not able to apply them consistently because of the vagaries of the political situation. The plan, I think, serves an important function with respect to the IAA mission. Specifically, as relates to planning and zoning policy documents, I think it creates linking arguments between, first, the policies and zoning general plans that are outlined and embodied in an outline plan, and second, the implementation on the ground that would be described in a detail plan. And then finally, the work of the individual who engages in a permit process, who's actually working on their own structure, or who has been hired in order to do the work. The plan that was presented here today, I think, would function very well in a section for conservation and historic structures within a detailed plan for the old city. So I think it provides a start in that. I'm going to pop forward. What you see here is a study by the NGO Bincombe of the area adjacent to the walls in the southern part of Silwan. It's more detailed than an outline plan and less detailed than the structure by structure detailed plan that will be required for the old city. But having these higher resolution zoning documents enables a set of controls and conversations that is not currently facilitated by the planning documents. Imagine for a moment that we have a detailed plan and some entity in the old city asks for a permit so they can alter their structure. This would be the moment, this request, when the principles in this plan we've heard about tonight would be activated, that is prior to the permit being approved, which is a suggestion we just heard. While we're moving from a general focus on a property to the specifics of a plan that will be offered by some party and actually carried out in this city. And once the detailed plans are submitted, consultation with stakeholders and experts has been done and permission has been received, then the conservation principles that the IAA publicly advocates, how to do responsible conservation, as you see here on their website, will guide the experts who do the structural work, whether that means fixing or enlarging or other changes. You can see them here. At a lower level, which is where these operate, that is where you actually have tools in hand, these represent another form of internationally accepted best practice, akin to historic urban landscape framework, but in the context of conservation ethics and best practice. So I make these comments because I think that we have possibilities for implementing widely accepted internationally accepted best practice in a manner that is logical, and we are missing one very important piece. Now, the master plan for Jerusalem places in high relief the fact that the planning processes are right now for the old city and Jerusalem, old city and its walls, inadequate to the task that lies at the feet of the state of Israel. The long-term task is the responsible management and governance of a densely populated, well, the most densely populated urban center, which is the focus of tourist, commercial, residential, sacred pilgrimage interests. And a brief look at this plan, the master plan, the outline plan, makes it clear that the municipal leaders again and again have judged them to be critical because they invest massive personnel efforts in developing them. But still, the progress has not been achieved at the level of the detailed plan that would facilitate permits, stabilization, restoration, preservation, because as I understand it, the political leaders have not stood behind their planners and argued for the vision of Jerusalem that they were elected to deliver. Members of this steering committee know that people make concrete decisions and can decide that it's time to alter the normal way of business because everyone's interests will be served in the long term. And I think that is one of the authorizations to this group, and that is that by speaking out and advocating for a revision of current practice, everyone's interests can be served in the long term and the status quo can be changed. And I use the status quo not in the sense of old city, but in the general sense. This can provide new kinds of benefits that are beyond reach now, but are not beyond imagining. In the analysis of the most recent master plan, Nadav Shvarai, writing for the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, argues that, quote, actually, this part is not a quote, planned expansions of Jewish neighborhoods that have to be expropriated are not going to be realized, in part because of problems with unregistered ownership, and also, and here I quote, given the current political and diplomatic reality, and here he means international attention and pressure, the plausibility that the state will use this planned inventory widely and will resume expropriating land, as it did in the past, is virtually nil. In other words, progressive conversations about Israel as a democratic state are attracting attention. He means that the international community is watching and listening to voices like the ones expressed in this plan, advocating for the protection of interests for all, for the development of the necessary zoning tools, is serving long-term shared interests. Now, Jerusalem is a city that trades in the long time span, and the master plan for conservation and preservation is designed to push back against the conveniences of the moment. That's the plan we've heard about tonight, of the short term, of the politically possible today, and to advocate instead for a robust response that will stand the test of time. A key goal of this master plan, as I see it, is to secure the future of what the authors of the number 4 outline plan for Jerusalem called the unique core. The release of this plan today, with its focus on the assets that endure and the people who live in them, represents an ideal time for Israel to engage this effort and to take action by convening a diverse body of experts and by leading the charge to establish and fund a process that with international support will lead to the creation of a detailed zoning plan for the old city and its walls with a registration process for property that, even if it doesn't determine ownership, allows that for people to proceed with various permitted options for any given parcel or structure. This would enable effective implementation of the master plan by a modern democratic state that can be regarded as responsible caretaker for irreplaceable local, national, and world heritage holy places. Also, Israel would gird itself to avoid the demands of the political quick fix when powerful stakeholders advocate for high buildings built near the old city walls, which is a conversation that we've already said has occurred in response to the general outline plan that has been unofficial these past few years or so. I hope you see this as something that is amusing rather than, well, perhaps terrifying also. But I think it's commendable that we have a detailed plan for conservation in the old city that was initiated by the IAA, and as I understand, it's on file unofficially, because this serves as a foundational document that serves the interests of the state and public alike. However, not to create a detailed public plan represents a focus only on stewardship of the archaeological resource, on keeping it as is. And in this, if we choose to take that as enough, we will have made the straightforward decision, but not the Solomonic one. We will have left people out of the process and imposed rather than collaborated from both a policy and an ethical perspective, and we will have kicked the problem over to the next guy to come along. And I think that the plan that was presented here today works against this and is a step in the right direction. Thank you.